The summer heat had settled over the Arizona territory when 18-year-old Clara Hayes rode home from town along a narrow trail. She was the daughter of a widowed rancher and had learned to handle horses, mend fences, and survive the harsh frontier without expecting anyone to rescue her. That afternoon, however, she discovered 4 people who desperately needed someone to stop and help. Near an abandoned mining camp, Clara heard a faint cry. She tied her horse behind a group of rocks and carefully walked toward the sound. There, beneath a broken wooden shelter, she found 4 Apache people bound with rope. They were exhausted and badly injured, and their weapons had been taken from them. Clara froze for a moment. She knew the danger of getting involved. Men who had tied them could still be nearby. But when one of the prisoners looked at her, Clara saw fear rather than anger. "Hold still," she whispered. "I can help." One of them shook his head urgently. "Go," he warned. "They will return." Clara looked around the empty camp. "Then I'll have to be quick." She pulled a small knife from her belt and cut through the ropes. The 4 Apache prisoners could barely stand. Clara gave them water from her canteen and tore strips from an old cloth to wrap their injuries. She soon learned that they had been captured by a gang of armed men searching for Apache horses. The gang had planned to sell the prisoners to another group farther south. Clara knew she could not simply leave them there. "Can you walk?" The oldest man nodded. "Then follow me." She led them toward her family's ranch, hidden several miles away in a valley surrounded by rocky hills. Her mother, Margaret, was shocked when Clara arrived with 4 strangers. "What have you done?" "I found them tied up." Margaret looked at the injured people and immediately understood. "Bring them inside." For the next 2 days, mother and daughter cared for their guests. They gave them food, clean water, and medicine. Clara learned that the oldest man was called Mateo, and the others were members of his extended family. They had been separated from their community during a raid. Clara expected them to leave as soon as they recovered. But on the 3rd morning, Mateo asked her a question. "Why did you help us?" Clara looked surprised. "Because you needed help." Mateo studied her face. Most people would have walked away. Clara shrugged. "My father taught me that being afraid doesn't mean you stop doing what is right." Her father had died years earlier, leaving Clara and her mother to run the ranch alone. Mateo nodded slowly. "Your father taught you well." That afternoon, the Apache group prepared to leave. Before they departed, Mateo gave Clara a small carved wooden pendant. "You saved 4 lives," he said. Clara shook her head. "You don't owe me anything." Mateo smiled. "You will understand later." They rode away toward the mountains. Clara thought the story was over. She was wrong. 3 days later, Clara was repairing a fence when she heard thunder. At first, she thought a storm was approaching. Then she looked toward the horizon. Hundreds of horses were moving across the valley. Her mother stepped onto the porch. "Clara, I see them." The riders came closer. There were hundreds of Apache warriors. Clara's heart raced. She wondered whether they had come for revenge. Margaret grabbed her arm. "Get inside." Clara shook her head. "No. If they wanted to attack us, they wouldn't have stopped at the ridge." The riders halted several hundred yards from the ranch. One man rode forward. It was Mateo. He dismounted and walked toward Clara with several elders behind him. "You saved our people," he said. Clara looked at the enormous group behind him. "I only did what anyone should have done." Mateo shook his head. Not everyone would have. He explained that the 4 people Clara had rescued were members of respected families. When they returned safely, the community learned what had happened. The elders had decided to come personally to thank the woman who had risked everything to save them. Clara looked at the hundreds of riders. "You came all this way for that." Mateo smiled. "We came because courage deserves an answer." One of the elders stepped forward. He placed a blanket over Clara's shoulders. "This is a sign of respect." Margaret watched with tears in her eyes. But the visit soon became more serious. Mateo warned Clara that the gang who had captured them knew about her ranch. "They may come looking for you." Clara's expression hardened. "Why?" "They believe you saw too much." That night, the Apache warriors remained outside the ranch. The next morning, the gang arrived. There were 12 armed men. Their leader shouted from horseback, "Send out the girl." Clara stepped onto the porch. "I don't think so." The leader laughed. "You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into." Clara looked toward the hills. The Apache warriors stood silently along the ridge. "You're right," she said. "I didn't." The leader turned around. Then he saw the hundreds of riders. His confidence disappeared. The Apache warriors did not attack. They simply stood there, watching. The gang slowly lowered their weapons. Mateo rode forward. "You came for the woman who saved our people." The gang leader looked around nervously. "She stole our prisoners." Mateo shook his head. "They were never yours." The territorial marshal arrived later that afternoon after being contacted by one of the ranchers nearby. The gang was arrested and charged with kidnapping and robbery. Clara never expected the situation to become so large. She had only seen 4 injured people and decided to help. But that decision changed everything. Over the following months, the relationship between Clara's ranch and the Apache community grew stronger. They traded horses, supplies, and knowledge. Mateo's people helped Clara repair the ranch after a severe winter storm. Clara's mother taught several Apache women how to preserve food using supplies available in the valley. Neither side forgot the years of mistrust between their communities, but they discovered that respect could begin with something very small. A person stopping when someone else needed help. One spring morning, Mateo returned to the ranch alone. He handed Clara another carved pendant. "What is this?" "A reminder." "Of what?" "The day you were brave enough to help 4 strangers." Clara smiled. "I was terrified." Mateo laughed softly. "Courage is not the absence of fear." Clara looked toward the mountains. "What is it then?" "Choosing what is right while fear tells you to run." Clara touched the pendant around her neck. Years later, people in the territory would tell stories about the day 300 Apache warriors rode across the valley. Some said they came to defend a ranch. Others said they came to repay a debt. But Clara always told the story differently. They came because 4 people came home alive. She never considered herself a hero. She had simply heard someone calling for help. She had stopped. And sometimes, that is all courage requires. A person willing to stop when everyone else keeps riding.